and now my wife.
Well, we are both thrilled to be back here. As you may have recognized from the poster outside, I'm actually here today. We're both here today as part of a deeper long-term series on the 5 basic unity principles. And for those of you who aren't familiar with these principles, it's important to note that while unity is sort of founded and shares these 5 principles, far from being dogma, I and definitely many of us in the unity movement see these principles as a starting point for a dynamic discussion internally as well as in community for what we do each actually believe, for what we know. So instead of seeing it as something that we have to believe, I often hold these principles as things that I try on like a coat to see if, hey, does this work for me? So with that, I'm going to share that the first basic unity principle is this. Basically, that there is only one power and one presence that is active in our lives and in the universe. It's God the good, and it expresses in all and through all and over all. The second basic unity principle is this. Tag, you're it. If God is in all and through all, then necessarily within you is this essence that is divine. And the third basic unity principle is actually a spiritual law, a law that we can each activate because we are divine. It's called the law of mind action, and that's what we're going to lead in here today. So if you could switch to the next slide. My talk today is kind of seems like it's beyond appearances. So in the 70s about, Norman Vincent Peale wrote this book, The Power of Positive Thinking. And in it, he tells the story of a man who's 52 years old who came to Peale for a consultation. As Peale describes it, this man was in a great despondency and utter despair. The man told Peale that everything that he had built up over his lifetime had been swept away. So Peale turns to him and says, "Everything?" Peale asked that. "Everything," the man repeated. He was through. He says, "I have nothing left. Everything is gone. There is no hope, and I am too old to start over again. I have lost all faith." Naturally, Peale felt sympathetic toward this man, and he writes in his book, "It was evident that the man's chief trouble was the fact that dark shadows of hopelessness had entered his mind and discolored his outlook, distorting it. Behind this twisted thinking," says Peale, "this man's true powers had retreated, leaving him without force. So," Peale says to this man, "suppose we take a piece of paper and write down the values that you have left." "There's no use," the man sighed. "I haven't a single thing left. I thought I just told you that." And Peale says gently, "Let's just see anyway." And then he asks, "So is your wife still with you?" "Well, yes, of course," the man says. "She's wonderful. We've been married for 30 years. And she would never leave me no matter how bad things got." "Okay," says Peale, "let's write that down. Your wife is still with you, and she will never leave you no matter how bad things get." Now, what about children? Do you have children? "Well, yeah," the man replies. "I have 3, and they're certainly wonderful. I've actually been touched by the way they have come to me and said, 'Dad, we love you, and we'll stand by you.'" "Well then," Peale says, writing that down, "got any friends?" The man says, yeah, actually, I have some fine friends. They've come around and said they would like to help me, but what can they do? They can't do anything, says the man. He writes that down, and Peel says, hey, how about your integrity? My integrity is all right, the man replied. I've always tried to do the right thing. My conscience is clear. All right, Peel says, let's write that down. Well, what about your health? Yeah, actually, my health's okay, says the man. I'm sick very seldom, and yeah, I guess I'm in pretty good shape, he says. And then Peel asks, so what about the United States? Do you think it's still a land of some opportunity at least? Yeah, yes, the man replied. It's actually the only country that I would want to live in. That's number 6, Peel says. How about your religious faith? Do you believe in God and that God, Spirit, will help you? And the man says, yes, I do. So now, Peel says, let's list the assets that we have figured out. And Peel then shoves this list right across the table at the man. Look at that. I guess you have quite a total of assets. I thought you told me that everything had been swept away. And the man grinned. I guess I didn't think those things. I never really thought of it that way. Perhaps things aren't so bad at that. And maybe I can start over again. And the man did just that. The story illustrates a profound truth that was expressed in a statement made by the famous psychiatrist Dr. Karl Menninger. Attitudes are more important than facts. This is not to say that facts don't matter and that we should ignore them, but it is to say that attitudes are more important than facts. So today we're going to consider this from a unity framework. First, I'll discuss the importance of a positive attitude given the third basic unity principle that thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. Second, I'll share how cultivating an attitude of gratitude helped me to start to turn my life around when I was, like this man, in a state of deep despair in my own life. And then finally, I'll explore how gratitude for the specific things and people in our lives is one way that we can start to manifest more good in our lives. But yet, in my view at least, and in my own life experience, we most fully tap into the power of the law of mind action when we can actually close our eyes to the outer world, as we did earlier in prayer. See beyond appearances altogether, beyond even the good and positive things in this outer world and in our lives, and established at the depths of our own consciousness the knowing of that invisible and yet infinite, powerful, profound, all-loving and all-wise Spirit of God that is within us and around us always. Everywhere present at all times. So first, let's consider the law of mind action. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. Corresponding to this universal law, unity teaches that we actually create or manifest our life experiences through the activity of our thinking. In her book, The Five Principles, Unity Minister Ellen Davenport writes this, that everything in the manifest realm has its beginning in thought. So, if we want to experience greater prosperity, love, joy, exuberance in our lives, it's our responsibility to change our thoughts. And you know, notably, this is actually an ancient truth. It's not solely the province of unity to believe in this. In fact, as recorded in the Dhammapada, the Buddha taught this, that all that we are is the result of what we have thought. It is founded on our thoughts and made up of our thoughts. If a man speaks or acts with an evil thought, suffering follows him as the wheel follows the hoof of the beast that draws the wagon. And if a man speaks or acts with a good thought, happiness follows him like a shadow that never leaves him, says the Buddha. In the daily word reading today that Sharon read, we heard that from a unity perspective, our will can be seen as the capacity to make choices. And we use this power to shape our ideas and thus our lives. In this way, each and every one of us here are empowered to be the gatekeepers of our own consciousness. We can choose our experiences by saying no to the negative thoughts that would arise in us, refusing to give them any space or any energy. And then correspondingly, by saying yes to those thoughts of truth and of good and of wholeness, and calling those forth into our being. Divine love, yes. Wholeness, yes. So now, I know that when I heard people talking about this, I was like, yeah. You know, this is great and I believe it, but it's easier to say, right, than to often practice. For many of us, especially, it's easier to do this when life seems to be going our way and people are doing exactly what we hope they'd be doing. So it's easy, you know, positive thoughts. But as Davenport observes, focusing on what we want is never more difficult than when something we don't want has already occurred, right? Has already occurred right here in our midst. And that leads to my second point for today, to share a personal story of how I used the practice of gratitude in my life to pick myself up at a time when I was despairing. So many of you might already know that prior to coming to ministerial school, I was an attorney in San Francisco. I had great credentials. You know, I actually graduated from Stanford Law School, and so looking for a job was never an issue for me. When I transitioned into ministry, in order to follow my calling, I stepped down from my secure, salaried associate position and became an independent contractor. And in the beginning, if you were here for a prior story, you'll hear that things were awesome. I basically negotiated this deal where I made the same amount of money I was making as the associate, but I got to work from home and take, you know, my SEE classes, everything I needed for ministerial school. And so I'm riding high and things are going great. I'm doing my affirmations and all happy. And then fall of 2008 comes. So I don't know if you guys remember November 2008, but in the exterior world, the market basically crashed. Banks, even the top law firms in the San Francisco Bay Area were letting like everyone go. So at this time, when salaried associates basically were not getting enough work, they were by no means going to pay extra to hire an independent contractor. So despite all my credentials, I found myself unemployed for the first time since my schooling, basically for the first time in my life. And I think for a month I didn't even realize it. I was in such shock, you know, I just kind of sat around. And then I started applying to jobs. And I didn't get a single response. I mean, not even a call or letter of acknowledgement. So I just kept applying for jobs. And then at this time, I, with my attorney's salary, owned a beautiful home in Marin County, one of the nicest areas, like in the country. And I wasn't able to pay my mortgage, so I rented out my home. And where did I go move in? Brilliant move at this time. I had just started dating this guy at this time, barely knew him, but he was happy to have me move in, so I moved in with someone I barely know. He lives far away from my spiritual community. I distanced myself from my spiritual community. I'm unemployed. I'm living with essentially a stranger, and we do not get along. And he's a master's student, and so he's living in this dingy place, and it's freezing every night, so I'm cold every night. So there I was, not making any money. And what happened then? I started getting parking tickets. San Francisco, they have these parking meter people going around, and almost like weekly. And then what was I saying? I was distant somehow from my truth, and I was like, I got another parking ticket. I can't believe I got another parking ticket. And I found myself, despite everything I knew in my truth teachings, saying that repeatedly every day. So guess what I kept getting for like 3 months? I got like 6 parking tickets in like 3 months. And then finally, I came upon the movie, The Secret. And I had already seen this film, right? And there are things I like about it. I think it's a little bit material, but its primary message is the law of mind action. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. Duh, right? Duh. And so from that moment, I set aside all my applications, and I decided I am not going to be seeking and trying to fix this world around me. I'm going to go inside myself. I'm going to spend the next few days in prayer. And I'm going to spend the next few days journaling. So I wrote I filled like an entire journal of everything I was grateful for. And it was difficult at first. It was like, okay, I'm alive, there's covering on top of me, even though this is not quite a building, It started that way, and then it got to build. And then I started practicing something more, which is when I started to think but, or when I started to think except this, I went back to the feeling of gratitude, the feeling of having. Even though my external circumstances did not seem to attest to this fact, by doing my gratitude, I could feel what it was like to be fulfilled. A week later, that tenant in my house gave notice, and I decided with a leap of faith I would move back in, and then things just started to get better and better from there. It just spiraled into this snowball of gratitude, and then increasing things to be grateful for, all things that led me finally to just a year later coming and getting accepted to ministerial school and having the funds to do that. So what's interesting about the story that I want to share is that in unity, it can be really confusing when we talk about the law of mind action, because we use the word thought. I want to be clear that by thought, I don't mean just intellectual thought. In unity, we're referring to something bigger, which we call consciousness. And so within that, we're talking about feelings too. We're talking about how we feel. So it's not enough to just hold this abstract thought of betterment, but we have to feel into the knowing of that. So I guess others have done the same thing. So Davenport says, our thoughts, feelings, and beliefs have the power to create our reality. Gratitude journaling allows me to elevate my feeling state to ones of hope and ones of having. Ellen Davenport again explains, so the hurdle then is not to only change our thoughts, but to actually feel as if the unwanted event is not happening. Or conversely, we feel what we want rather than reacting to what is in the moment. We feel what we want. And then I found this ability that we develop through gratitude journaling moves us away from gratitude journaling into what I consider the highest use of the power of mind action, which is our ability to choose spiritual truth over falsehood, without even needing to point to any exterior good in our lives, because our consciousness has become so steeped in the knowing of this invisible and yet omnipresent Spirit of the divine. And so that leads to my final point for today. That feeling good through a gratitude practice is one thing, but cultivating our faith in the invisible Spirit is a deeper way of transforming our consciousness, such that we can truly be transformed by the renewing of our minds, as the Bible teaches us. So gratitude practice is often focused on the things in this world, right? The people and the things in this world. And we do get into the flow and the feeling of our good by remembering the things or people which already bless us. For me, this is often a necessary step when I'm feeling particularly demoralized about a situation. But I found over time is if I can continue to maintain my prayer practice, I can start to add to the spiritual toolkit of mine the practice of knowing this invisible spiritual truth. This truth that despite what it seems like, despite appearances, all abundance, all joy, all love, and all prosperity are here, present now, in this moment, ready to be received and claimed. So going back again to that daily word that was read earlier today, the affirmation was this: I use my human willpower to act on divine ideas in the world. So I want you all to notice that this is not saying that I'm changing my life by exerting my will onto others to try to force these other people and these circumstances to change a bit. But to me, what it seems to be saying is this: that I use my willpower to choose truth ideas in consciousness and then to live, to act from these ideas rather than from the ideas that I gained from my sense consciousness, from my material consciousness. The highest use of our willpower then lies in our willingness to choose the good or the true over error thoughts of lack and limitation in any way in our lives, as written in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. Finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence and if there is anything worthy of praise, think on these things. What is worthy of praise in your life right now? Might it be the presence of God? Think on these things. I referred to the ability to see that truth as seeing through the eyes of spiritual faith. Some might refer to this as seeing or listening with your heart. In the book The Little Prince, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry writes this: it is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. And as Victor actually sang earlier in the song Seems Like, what each of us is experiencing might, quote, seem like the only truth, but things ain't always what they seem. Oh, they're not. Whoa, whoa, they're not. And if you're worried I was going to sing that, don't worry, it only seemed that way. That's not my province. So I see, we see, you see, I see beyond appearances, beyond how things seem, through this faculty of spiritual faith, which Charles Fillmore called the perceiving power of the mind, linked with the power to mold universal substance. The perceiving power of the mind, linked with the power to mold the universal substance. So cultivating our faith through the practice of prayer, we're able to start each day with this default knowing that everything we ask for has already been given to us in truth. Not necessarily in the form that my ego would cling to, but in essence, we have that. And what I've come to see is, as I've developed this in myself, is not achievement in the outer, which is transitory, but a greater sense then each day as we cultivate this of inner confidence and peace, this assuredness that everything is all right. And in the words of a song that I'm going to ask Victor to sing in a moment, everything's all right, and there is absolutely nothing that I need that I don't already have. So in conclusion, I just want to repeat that attitudes are more important than facts. Norman Vincent Peale said, that is worth repeating until its truth grips you. This is not to say that facts don't matter at all, but again, Peale's words, any fact facing us, however difficult, even seemingly hopeless, is not so important as our attitude toward that fact. How you think about a fact may defeat you before you ever do anything about it. You may permit a fact to overwhelm you mentally before you start to deal with it actually. And on the other hand, a positive thought pattern can modify or overcome the fact altogether. Indeed, each of us has this ability to overcome even the most dire of facts through the power of our thinking. First, by cultivating an attitude of gratitude to lift our energy to the level of our good, and thereby manifest greater good in our lives through the law of mind action. But at the same time, as I said earlier, our deepest power lies not in concerning ourselves with what good we manifest in the outer, but in our ability to know beyond doubt, within ourselves, to know and realize that inner Christ at the depths of our being, that we are whole, to know that we are whole, to know that we have everything that we think we need already, that the Spirit of God has fully provided in this moment, and it is only ours to rise up to the level of acceptance and receiving that comes from saying, yeah, this is mine, I take it. There is nothing I need that is not already given. And with that, I'll invite Victor to take us into a time of meditation.